The human's boots clicked softly against the polished floor of the alien palace, echoing in a hall that seemed to stretch endlessly. He had walked these halls countless times, yet tonight something felt different. The air was heavier, tinged with the faint hum of power and authority. Every step reminded him that he was not at home, that he was surrounded by beings far older, taller, and more powerful than humanity had ever known. And yet, he moved forward, steadying his nerves because he had a duty, even if the galaxy had already decided he was a minor player in this vast cosmic stage. He had been a human envoy to the Empress for only a few months, and already he had learned to tread carefully. Every gesture mattered, every word could be twisted, and every glance might be studied for weaknesses. Humans, they believed, were curious but weak, fragile and easily broken. Most of the alien courtiers barely even tolerated his presence. Some ignored him entirely, others sneered or muttered behind his back, speaking in languages he could not understand. But he had learned the most important lesson of all. To survive here, he needed patience. And now he had been summoned. The message had been brief, almost cold. Come to my chambers tonight. Alone. That alone had been enough to make his stomach knot. No human had ever been summoned alone to the Empress's private quarters. Rumors whispered about what happened to those who disobeyed the chain of command, or worse, those who were called without reason. Executions were rare, but disappearances happened frequently enough that no one dared question the summons. He hesitated just outside the massive doors. They were carved from a single black crystalline slab that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange alien symbols crawled across the surface, pulsing faintly, almost like a heartbeat. He had no idea what they meant, but he guessed they were warnings or perhaps protections. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the doors open and stepped inside. The room was unlike anything he had expected. It was vast, yet intimate in a way that felt almost human. The walls shimmered with energy, but there were objects he could recognize, books, sculptures, plants that glowed softly in the dim light. He expected only cold stone and machines, and then he saw her, the Empress. She stood in the center of the room, a tall, imposing figure draped in robes that seemed alive, shifting with light and color. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were sharp and commanding, yet when they landed on him there was something else, something human might call curiosity. She did not move immediately, simply observing him, letting the silence stretch between them. "You are brave," she said finally, her voice soft but carrying through the room like a melody laced with steel. "Or perhaps foolish. Few humans would walk through my doors at night and not tremble. I come as instructed." He sat, keeping his posture straight, trying to project calm even though his heart pounded. The Empress moved to a corner of the room and waved her hand. A panel slid open, revealing a strange device that seemed part machine, part organic matter. It pulsed with light, shifting in color and intensity in a rhythm that seemed alive. He had never seen technology like this, none of the human science he knew could compare. And yet there was something familiar in its design, some pattern that reminded him of stories from Earth, old myths, tales of beings who traveled among the stars. "You do not understand," she said softly, as if reading his thoughts. "What you see here is not mere technology, it is history, it is power. And it is yours in ways you cannot imagine." And then he saw something that made him stop breathing. There among the alien designs were symbols that matched the ancient human scripts he had studied back on Earth. Symbols that were said to belong to lost human civilizations, to things thought to be myth. "Impossible," he whispered, barely audible. The Empress's gaze softened slightly. "Not impossible," she said. "Forgotten, perhaps. Misunderstood, certainly, but not impossible. Humanity once reached far beyond what you think you know. And what you see here is proof that your kind has always been part of this galaxy, whether you believe it or not." All his life, humans had been told they were insignificant, that they were fragile, that they could barely survive on their home planet. And yet here was a being who ruled an empire spanning stars, telling him that humans had once walked among them in ways he could barely comprehend. Why show me this?" he asked finally, his voice trembling. The Empress regarded him carefully. "Because you are human, and humans are unlike any other species I have encountered. You adapt. You endure, you change, you survive in ways that even the oldest of my people cannot. That is why you are here, that is why I summoned you." The weight of the revelation pressed down on him, but beneath it there was a spark of something he had not felt in a long time, hope. Humanity might be small, weak, underestimated, but perhaps that did not mean they were powerless. "You must not speak of this," she said suddenly, her tone sharp and commanding. No one must know what you have seen tonight, not your people, not mine. The knowledge is dangerous in the wrong hands. One day, your kind may be the key to what I cannot achieve alone. The hum of the room, the pulse of the holograms, and the quiet rhythm of the Empress's breathing were the only sounds. He felt small, fragile, and yet significant. Finally, she spoke again. You may leave, but remember, what you have seen tonight changes nothing for the world outside this room. Live as you must, but never forget what you have learned. He bowed, more out of instinct than respect, and stepped toward the doors. Before he reached them, she spoke once more, her voice low, almost a whisper. The doors closed behind him with a resonant click, leaving him alone with the echoes of what he had seen. Outside, the palace was quiet, almost peaceful, but he knew nothing would ever be the same. The galaxy he had thought he understood was far larger, far more complex, and far more dangerous than he had imagined. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a single thought pulsed like a heartbeat. If humans could survive here, in the shadow of gods and empires, perhaps they were stronger than anyone had ever believed. He walked back to his quarters, each step heavier with the weight of knowledge and responsibility. That night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his tiny human room, replaying every detail of the Empress's chamber, every symbol, every word. The hum of the alien city outside was distant, but it reminded him that the galaxy moved with a rhythm he had yet to understand. And somewhere deep inside him, a fire began to burn, a quiet human fire. It was the kind of fire that had kept humanity alive for thousands of years. Curiosity, resilience, and the determination to endure, no matter the odds. The human woke before dawn, the memory of the Empress's words burning in his mind. He could still see the glow of the strange device, the floating symbols, and most vividly, the certainty in her eyes that humans were not as insignificant as the galaxy believed. Every instinct screamed caution. He was a single human in a palace filled with beings who could crush him without thought, but curiosity gnawed at him. He needed to understand. He needed to know what she had shown him. Breakfast was quiet, the alien attendants moving silently around him. He kept his focus on the meal, though his mind wandered to the images of the holograms. Star maps of places he had never imagined, symbols that resembled ancient human scripts, and strange diagrams that seemed to explain the flow of energy through living beings. Something about it all felt familiar, yet utterly alien. He was startled when a soft knock came at his door. "Enter," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. A junior aide, a thin and pale alien with elongated fingers and eyes that reflected the light in odd ways, stepped inside. "Sir," the aide said in a voice almost musical, "the Empress requests your presence in her private study. There is something she wishes to discuss with you, alone." Few dared approach him directly, but the whispers were unmistakable. He could not understand the language, but the tone told him enough. He was being observed, studied, judged. When he entered the Empress's private study, she was already there, standing before a large circular table that seemed to float slightly above the ground. The surface shimmered, showing moving images of stars, planets, and fleets of ships. It was a galaxy in motion, alive with endless possibilities. "You came," she said, her tone neutral, yet carrying an unspoken question. "Good, sit." He had learned that these devices were more than furniture. They were part of the intelligence that ran the palace, responding to thought as much as command. The Empress stepped to the side and waved her hand. The floating table shifted, projecting a specific map of stars, some blinking with red light, others glowing softly. He recognized no systems, no coordinates he had ever studied. "This galaxy," she said, "is older than your history, larger than your imagination. My empire has ruled it for centuries, but it is not eternal. It is fragile in ways even my council cannot understand. And now humanity may play a role in its survival. How can humans, our species, affect a galaxy of beings far older and stronger than us? But I trust that you will listen and learn. But one species we underestimated, humans. Your ancestors reached into the stars, and for reasons you have long forgotten, you withdrew. But your potential never left you. Your myths and legends are not merely stories. They are records, partially forgotten, of your past presence among the stars. The device you saw yesterday contains remnants of that knowledge, preserved in ways that even I cannot fully control. Humanity, thought to be weak and primitive, had once touched the galaxy in ways even the most powerful aliens could not ignore. "Why hide it?" he asked softly. "Because knowledge is dangerous," she said. In the wrong hands, it could destroy worlds. My council does not understand humans. They would see this as a threat. They cannot grasp your kind's strength, your ingenuity, or your unpredictability. You must never speak of this, yet you must learn from it. One day, your species may need to do what my empire cannot. Could it be possible that humans, so underestimated, held the key to survival on a galactic scale? The thought seemed absurd, yet the evidence in the room was undeniable. You will help me understand, she said. I have studied the galaxy, observed its currents, and I have predicted events that will come long after I am gone. But there are gaps. I cannot foresee everything. Your perspective, human perspective, may fill those gaps. Look here, she gestured to a projection of a planet surrounded by red light. This world is dying. Its sun is unstable, its people trapped in cycles of decay and war. My empire cannot intervene without sparking rebellion. But you, human, may see what we do not. How could your species approach such a problem? Unlike most alien species, humans did not rely solely on strength or tradition. Humans adapted, improvised, and persisted. I would observe first, he began. See what the people are doing, how the environment responds. Then I would test small changes carefully to see what works. Large interventions often cause more problems than they solve. And yet effective. She gestured at another projection, showing a collapsing fleet caught in a gravitational storm. Humans do not have the technology to manipulate such forces directly, but you think in ways that do not rely on brute strength or overwhelming power. You find solutions where others see none. He was a human, yes, fragile, limited, but perhaps that was an advantage. He had always thought humans were weak. Here he realized that weakness was a form of freedom. Humans could think differently precisely because they did not have centuries of rigid tradition binding them. The Empress studied him, her gaze piercing. You underestimate your own species, she said. They have forgotten the lessons of their ancestors, but the lessons remain. Resilience, ingenuity, curiosity, qualities my empire takes for granted in its citizens, but which you carry naturally. And it is this that makes you valuable. You may succeed where my empire would fail. But do not focus on failure. Focus on learning, observing, and understanding. That is all I ask. Your role is to see what others cannot, to think what others will not, to act where others hesitate. He was not just a human envoy. He was an observer, a bridge between his species and forces far beyond his comprehension. And somewhere deep inside him, a spark of determination ignited. Humans might be small, limited, and underestimated, but they were capable of things even the greatest empires could not predict. The Empress's voice pulled him back from his thoughts. I will not lie to you. The Council watches, the galaxy moves, and danger waits at every turn. You will need allies, but choose them carefully. Not all who appear loyal are trustworthy. Observe, think, and act wisely. Learn its people, its challenges, its resources. Learn how humans might interact with it if given the chance. And remember, what you learn here must remain secret. The knowledge is too powerful for ordinary beings. The human noticed connections, patterns, and possibilities that even the Empress had not considered. His mind raced with solutions, observations, and potential strategies. Ideas born from human adaptability, ingenuity, and survival instincts. When he finally left the study, the sun had risen over the alien city. The palace was alive with movement, the corridors filled with courtiers, guards, and emissaries. And yet he walked with a new sense of purpose. He was still human, still fragile, but he carried knowledge, understanding, and a spark of insight that even the most powerful beings had overlooked. Somewhere in the depths of the galaxy, a dying world awaited, and a human observer might just be its unexpected savior. The Empress's words echoed in his mind. Humans endure when others collapse. That simple truth, long underestimated, now guided every step he took. For the first time, he truly understood. Humanity had a place among the stars. And if they could survive the challenges to come, no power in the galaxy could ignore them again. The human's quarters were quiet, but his mind was not. He replayed the Empress's lessons over and over, analyzing the strange planet they had studied and the red blinking systems that signaled danger. Unlike the aliens he served, humans had a habit of thinking in ways that were not always orderly but often practical. Where others saw chaos, he saw possibilities. He understood the patterns of life, adaptation, and survival even in places that seemed hopeless. The morning light fell across his table, illuminating charts and reports the Empress had provided. He traced his fingers across diagrams of the alien fleets, energy flows, and political alliances. Each layer revealed a weakness in the Empire's logic, a blind spot that only a human mind could see. It was not brute strength or centuries of experience. It was intuition, curiosity, and the willingness to question assumptions. The Empress summoned him again before noon. When he entered the study, she did not waste time with pleasantries. "We have a problem," she said, her tone steady but urgent. "The galaxy is approaching an event I cannot prevent alone. My fleets can stabilize some worlds, but the scale, it is too great. Entire civilizations will fall, species you cannot even name will vanish, and yet humans might succeed where my empire cannot. We are few, scattered, and untested against powers like yours. That is why I need you." She waved her hand and a new hologram appeared, a world where forests burned endlessly and the seas were receding. Cities clung to the edges of rivers that no longer flowed, and alien populations struggled to survive in harsh conditions. "This planet," she said, "was once prosperous. Its species were clever, resourceful, but now they are trapped in cycles of failure. They cling to outdated strategies, afraid of change. If nothing is done, they will collapse completely within decades. And if you can find a way to influence them, guide them subtly without direct intervention, they may survive. Test strategies that don't risk mass collapse. Help them see options they have ignored. Observe, learn, recommend. I will provide support only when necessary. But the decisions, the insights must be yours. If this fails, do not fail in the way others fail. Learn, adjust, endure." The species were intelligent, capable, and yet trapped by fear and tradition. But humans had always excelled in similar circumstances: small groups, limited resources, high risk. He began drafting strategies, small steps to influence their choices without overwhelming them. As the day passed, he felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The Empress occasionally checked his work, offering insights, but mostly he was left alone to think, to observe, to plan. It was unlike anything he had experienced before. He was trusted, valued, and yet responsible for lives across the galaxy. Then a message arrived from the Empress's inner council, carried by a silent drone. It was short and sharp. "The human is meddling. Watch closely. Report immediately if he acts beyond observation." He felt a chill. Others were watching, judging, perhaps plotting against him. The council did not understand humans. They did not understand subtlety, intuition, or patience. To them, action was force, control, domination. To him, action was thought, planning, and timing. He realized then that his survival depended not only on helping the alien species, but also on navigating the politics of the Empress's court. One wrong move, one misinterpreted action, and he could be destroyed, not by the species he was trying to help, but by the very people who claimed to rule the galaxy. He spent the next weeks in careful observation. He suggested minor interventions through the Empress's agents, guiding decisions, adjusting plans, and testing outcomes. Each success built confidence, each failure taught lessons. And through it all, he began to notice something remarkable. Humans, even far from Earth, could influence systems subtly and effectively. Their adaptability and ingenuity gave them an advantage that no raw power could match. The Empress observed quietly, occasionally stepping in to correct misunderstandings or add insight, but mostly she watched him work. She had expected him to fail, or at least falter. But humans, she realized, were not so easily broken. Their strength lay not in dominance, but in endurance, creativity, and a refusal to be constrained by fear. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, he remained in the study, reviewing outcomes of his suggestions. The planet had begun to stabilize. Forests regrew slowly, migrations shifted toward sustainable regions, and leadership decisions reflected more foresight. He could see that small changes, guided by subtle advice, could ripple outward, transforming the world in ways the Council would never predict. The Empress entered silently. "You see," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "this is what I meant when I spoke of human strength. You do not command with fear. You do not dominate with force. You observe, you adapt, and you guide. And that is a power few recognize. You are underestimated, overlooked, and yet capable of shaping outcomes far beyond what others imagine." Here in the shadow of empires, he realized they were something far greater. As night fell, he returned to his quarters, exhausted but determined. He reviewed his plans again, noting adjustments, improvements, and next steps. Every decision, every insight carried weight, not just for the species he observed, but for the galaxy itself. And in the quiet of his room, he allowed himself a thought he had never dared before. Perhaps humans were not just survivors. Perhaps they were, in ways no one expected, the galaxy's greatest hope. The Empress's warning echoed in his mind. Do not fail in the way others fail. Learn, adjust, endure. He repeated it silently, committing it to memory. It was simple advice, but in it lay the essence of human strength. Somewhere beyond the stars, civilizations teetered on the edge of collapse. Systems were unstable, alliances fragile, and lives hanging by a thread. And yet one human, underestimated and overlooked, might be the key to guiding them toward survival. The galaxy did not yet know the value of humanity, but he did. And in that knowledge, he found purpose, courage, and the quiet fire that had kept his species alive for millennia. For the first time, he understood fully that human ingenuity, patience, and adaptability were not weaknesses, they were advantages. And in the days to come, he would test them in ways even the Empress had not imagined. The palace corridors were alive with whispers. The human could feel the tension in the air as he moved from one chamber to the next. His small frame and human appearance drew curious and suspicious glances from every corner. Even in a place as grand and ancient as the Empress's palace, subtlety mattered, and he had learned quickly to read the undercurrents of observation and judgment. The council had grown uneasy. Though the Empress had trusted him, her advisors did not. They were a collection of species older and more powerful than humanity, and they viewed his presence as an anomaly, a disruption. Whispers suggested that the human might be manipulating the Empress, guiding decisions in ways the council could not predict. Some called him a threat, others simply called him foolish, an inconsequential mortal overstepping his bounds, but the human knew better. He had spent weeks studying the systems, observing patterns, and subtly influencing choices. Every action he had taken was calculated, measured, and non-intrusive. He did not impose his will, he guided. He did not command, he suggested. And yet the results were undeniable. Small adjustments, small interventions were stabilizing the dying worlds the Empress had shown him. He found her waiting in the study. Her presence was calm, almost serene, but he sensed the tension that had begun to build. "You are aware," she said softly, "that the council is watching you more closely than before. They do not understand what I am doing, and they fear what they cannot control. If they discover your influence, it could be used against you." Each world faced a combination of environmental degradation, political unrest, and resource scarcity. The human studied the systems carefully, noting the patterns and connections. He could see the subtle ways in which one failure cascaded into another, creating instability and chaos. "These species," he said, pointing to the projection, "are resistant to change. They cling to tradition, fear innovation, and repeat the same mistakes over and over. If we do not intervene subtly, they will collapse. I can create small interventions that will ripple outward, stabilizing the systems without drawing attention." He communicated through intermediaries, leaving subtle instructions and suggestions that were easily mistaken for natural advice. He guided leaders to make better decisions, advised scientists on sustainable methods, and even suggested small environmental adjustments that helped stabilize collapsing ecosystems. As his influence grew, the council's suspicions also increased. They noted changes in the worlds the human was observing and traced the adjustments back to him. Rumors spread that he was overstepping his role, that he was guiding civilizations without permission. Some whispered that the Empress was being manipulated by a mortal, an impossible thought that ignited fear and resentment. One evening, the human was summoned to the council chamber. The room was filled with beings of immense stature, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and thinly veiled hostility. The human stepped forward, his posture calm, his mind focused. "You have been very active, human," the council leader said, his voice deep and resonant. "Your interventions have been noted. Tell us, what authority do you have to guide these species? The systems are improving, the species are responding. How do you explain this?" The council was not used to being challenged, and certainly not by a mortal. They had power, experience, and authority, yet here was a human speaking with logic, clarity, and insight that even they could not ignore. The Empress entered the chamber, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Enough," she said, her voice echoing through the room. "The human acts under my guidance. His methods may be unconventional, but the results are evident. You may distrust him, but his purpose aligns with the survival of our empire and the galaxy." The council's watchful eyes would not waver, and one misstep could end his mission and his life. Returning to the study, he found the Empress waiting, her expression unreadable. You handled yourself well, she said. But remember, human, caution is as important as insight. The Council will continue to test you. They cannot predict your methods, and that is your advantage. But they can destroy your influence if you are careless. That is your greatest strength. He was learning not just to survive, but to shape outcomes on a scale he had never imagined. One night, he observed a crisis on one of the planets. A sudden drought threatened entire populations, and leaders were on the verge of panic. He considered his options carefully, knowing that any direct intervention could draw attention. Instead, he suggested a small adjustment to irrigation systems through local engineers, a solution that appeared to be their own idea. Within days, the crisis began to stabilize, and he noted the subtle changes in leadership attitudes, more openness to adaptation, less reliance on outdated methods. The Council noticed the improvements but could not trace them directly to him. They speculated, argued, and sometimes accused each other of influence, but the human remained beyond their reach. He had learned to operate within the cracks of the system, using human ingenuity to guide without control, influence without domination. The Empress watched quietly, occasionally offering input, but largely allowing him to operate independently. She had chosen wisely, trusting in human adaptability and resilience. She understood what the Council did not. Humans were unpredictable, creative, and capable of solutions that no rigid system could produce. As the days turned into weeks, the human began to see the impact of his work. The species he observed were stabilizing, the world slowly recovering, and the systems adjusting to changes in ways that the Council had never anticipated. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not pride, but understanding that human adaptability and resilience could achieve what brute strength and centuries of experience could not. One evening, the Empress entered the study with a rare expression of warmth. "You have done well," she said. "The Council watches, the galaxy teeters, yet your influence has already saved lives. Your methods are unconventional but effective. That is human strength, adaptability, insight, and endurance. Observe, learn, adjust, survive. That is why I trust you, and that is why the galaxy still has hope." He was still human, still fragile, but he carried within him a power that the galaxy could not yet recognize: insight, adaptability, and the quiet fire of survival that had carried humanity across millennia. He knew the Council would continue to watch, and that danger could strike at any moment. But he also knew that humans were capable of far more than anyone expected. And in the quiet of the palace night, he allowed himself a thought he had never dared before. Perhaps humans were not merely survivors. They were the key to ensuring that life, in all its forms, could endure. The human walked through the palace corridors with a careful awareness. Every step, every shadow, every whisper could mean danger. The Council's distrust had grown into active suspicion, and rumors of a coup swirled through the palace like a gathering storm. He had sensed it for days. The Council was preparing to challenge the Empress to seize control of the Empire. Their fear of him, a mortal human influencing events, had only strengthened their resolve. He paused at the edge of a balcony, looking out over the city that stretched beneath the twin moons. The alien metropolis sparkled with 1,000 lights, but beneath its beauty lay tension, fragility, and ambition. Every glowing spire was a reminder that the Empire depended on balance, and even a small disruption could send it spiraling into chaos. His mind worked quickly. He had anticipated this moment. The Council would act and the Empress could be in danger. But humans excelled in situations where rules were rigid, power was unquestioned, and the unexpected could turn the tide. He began to plan, considering every variable, every possible response. When he entered the Empress's chambers, she was already standing near the central table, her expression calm but alert. "It has begun," she said quietly. "The Council has moved against me. They intend to take control, using the fleets and their authority to impose their will. We guide, misdirect, and exploit their assumptions. The Empire depends on it." Then he began to manipulate the flow of information subtly, sending false signals, misdirecting fleets, and creating illusions of troop movements. Every message, every projection, every adjustment was designed to sow confusion without revealing his hand. By the time the first Council ships moved to assert control, they were already reacting to phantom threats. Fleets that should have coordinated were delayed, diverted, or misinformed. The Council's communication lines, once secure, were subtly disrupted by sequences he had introduced, causing hesitation and internal doubt. The Empress watched quietly as the human worked. Her centuries of experience told her that intervention could be risky. But she had seen enough to know that humans, with their unique perspective, could achieve outcomes others could not imagine. And now she observed that power firsthand. In the council chambers, chaos erupted. Council members barked orders, only to find that their fleets had been misdirected or stalled. Communication breakdowns caused confusion, and the council's carefully laid plans began to unravel. No one could understand why their strategies were failing, why their control was slipping. The human remained in the study, monitoring, adjusting, guiding. He suggested subtle changes to local planetary defenses, rerouted supply chains, and coordinated with trusted agents on the surface, all without direct confrontation. Each move relied on prediction, observation, and timing rather than brute force. Hours passed, the tension mounting. The council, frustrated and disoriented, began to make mistakes. They underestimated the Empress, underestimated the human, and underestimated the unpredictable nature of adaptability. Small miscalculations became larger ones, and the advantage slowly shifted toward those defending the throne. Finally, the Empress spoke, her voice calm but carrying authority. "Now, human, it is time for decisive action. The Council will attempt one final move to seize control. You must guide the fleets and systems to counter them subtly, without revealing yourself." Every action was designed to appear as coincidence, natural resistance, or independent decisions by commanders loyal to the Empress. The climax arrived swiftly. Council leaders attempted to coordinate an assault on the central command hub, expecting surprise and confusion to favor them. Instead, they encountered resistance they could not explain. Systems that anticipated their moves, fleets that responded before commands were issued, and allies acting in unison with a precision that seemed almost prescient. The human had orchestrated it all. Not by controlling directly, not by brute force, but by predicting behavior, exploiting assumptions, and guiding outcomes with subtle influence. His understanding of systems, adaptation, and human ingenuity had turned the tide. Inside the council chambers, the remaining loyal members began to act. Some realized the coup was failing, while others attempted to retreat or regroup. Chaos turned into defeat, and the council's power crumbled without a single major battle. The humans' interventions had prevented bloodshed, protected the Empress, and preserved the stability of the Empire. When the last council member retreated, the Empress turned to him. Her eyes, always sharp, held a warmth rarely seen. "You have done what no one else could," she said softly. "You have protected the Empire, preserved countless lives, and outmaneuvered centuries of experience. Humanity's strength is not in numbers or power, but in adaptability, insight, and endurance. You have proven it." Humans, underestimated and overlooked, had altered the course of an entire empire. "I only did what humans do," he said humbly. "Observe, adapt, and endure. We survive." They will begin to understand that your species, though underestimated, holds potential beyond imagination. Humans endured, adapted, and influenced outcomes with subtlety and insight. Their strength was in thought, creativity, and resilience, traits that no army or fleet could replicate. In the following days, the Empress publicly addressed the galaxy. She spoke of the near collapse, the threats to civilizations, and the unexpected guidance that had stabilized systems. She did not reveal all the details, but she spoke clearly of humanity's role, highlighting their unique strengths: adaptability, ingenuity, and endurance. Across the galaxy, humans were no longer considered minor players. They were respected, recognized, and valued. The human envoy, once overlooked and underestimated, had become a symbol of human potential. His actions had saved countless lives, preserved civilizations, and demonstrated the remarkable qualities of his species. The Empress invited him to stand beside her during her address. "This human," she said, her voice carrying across the hall and through the projection networks of the galaxy, "represents the true potential of humanity. They endure when others falter. They adapt when others fail, and they guide with insight where others rely on brute strength. Let this be known, humans are not to be underestimated." He realized that survival, observation, and adaptability, the qualities humans had honed over millennia, were not just traits of endurance, but instruments of influence and power. In the quiet moments afterward, the Empress spoke privately. "You have proven something remarkable, human, not just to me, but to the galaxy. Humanity is no longer a minor species. You have shown that your perspective, your ingenuity, and your adaptability can alter outcomes that even the oldest civilizations cannot. Your species carries a spark that others have long forgotten, a spark that can change the course of history. Remember this, human, and remember what you have done here. The galaxy now knows that humans are more than they imagined, and I will not forget it either. Courtiers, attendants, and even the remaining council members regarded him differently, with respect, caution, and curiosity. He had survived not by strength, not by command, but by using the qualities that made humans extraordinary: thought, ingenuity, and the quiet power of adaptability. Outside, the city shone under twin moons, a reminder of the vastness of the empire and the complexity of the galaxy. The human looked up, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here, from a minor envoy to a symbol of human potential. He realized that the true strength of humanity lay not in conquest or domination, but in endurance, insight, and the ability to navigate impossible challenges with courage and creativity. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a human influence that no one expected. And though the Council and countless others still underestimated humanity, the Empress knew the truth. Humans endured where others faltered, adapted where others failed, and shaped outcomes where others could only react. The human walked onward, carrying with him the quiet fire of his species, the spark that had preserved humanity for millennia. And in that spark, the galaxy saw the promise of a future shaped not by fear or power alone, but by the enduring, adaptable, and unpredictable strength of humanity itself. The human had survived. He had influenced empires, guided civilizations, and altered the course of history. And in doing so, he had proven what humans had always known deep in their bones. When the galaxy underestimated them, it was a mistake it would never forget. "I couldn't believe what I saw in her room," Alien Empress said. "Don't tell anyone about this, human."